I mean, I should note that when it comes to my OCD, that I'm not like the type of person that has a bunch of tics or anything like that. I'm not the type of OCD that most people commonly hear about. That like I'm anal retentive or anything. I mean, you can tell that my place isn't the cleanest place in the world. And you probably wouldn't know that I have OCD of any kind or any level, just by knowing me. But the fact of the matter is, when I get locked in on things, I get obsessed with them. I mean, I become hyper focused with them. It's very difficult for me to break out. Even short-term things, like playing with the numbers on this stuff. I really wanted to avoid doing that, because when I start playing around with numbers, like the projections on profitability and so forth, these things could generate. I mean, I could get tied. I mean, obsessed with that for literally weeks. And so I'm really disinclined to even want to mess with it at all. That's why I didn't even want to crunch any kind of statistics on this at all because of that. Um, but fortunately I was able to break out after just a couple of days. But I mean, I do tend to get obsessed and it's, my ADD tends to take me in these directions, and then my OCD kicks in and I kind of lock in on it, become obsessed with it. So, just like I was saying in one of the other tapes about my, creditors and stuff, and how, like I said, yeah, I mean, anytime creditors would call me, I became, I'd become obsessed with it, every time that would happen. It would just really start taking me down there, and it would be like a broken wheel, that I could hardly break out of, so it would eat up a lot of my time, being obsessed with that. That's why I'm going to avoid situations where I have to freaking worry, appreciably about things like that ever again. I mean, I'm just never going down that road again in any way, shape, form, or another. So, again, that's why I haven't even had so much as a credit card since 2004 and don't miss them, because of that. I mean, I'd be happy if I could do without credit the rest of my damn life. And it's, the thing about credit is that it's not really credit that was the problem. I mean, before all that stuff with CSSL and, my employees stabbed me in the back and stuff, I had really good credit. And that's one of the reasons I had really good credit, because I generally, kept it paid off. We used credit all the time, but, we generally pay our credit cards off a lot and everything like that. I mean, that's how we got a good credit standing, because, I, always paid my bills and often paid things off ahead of time and everything. But, again, when all of a sudden we were sitting there with no income, well, like I said, our bank, helped us out a lot. We went to them with a problem, but still we had to use every credit resource available because they didn't come up with enough money. They didn't come up with the minimum amount of money I told them at minimum we needed. Partly because there was an SBA budget crisis at the time. It was, their lending limit was capped at like $500,000, and that was, versus the $2 million their normal cap was at the time. And it's hard to get a $2 million loan when their cap was $2 million. Well, when their cap is drawn down to $500,000, it's hard to get anywhere near $500,000. I mean, you got to have just like extra special. So that's why we had a hard time getting anywhere near that. We got about half that, less than half that level. So, at the end of the day, that's what I talk about with that budget crisis, and some of that stuff. But my point is, see, there I go. It's my ADD. I'm just off on a tangent there. I mean, it has nothing to do with what I'm trying to talk about. That's just, like I said, I'm the type of person, my ADD, you probably wouldn't know that I had it just by talking with me, except, if you just knew me. But the fact of the matter is that since I tend to drift, that's kind of a sign of it. But it's not extraordinary. It's like, again, I don't have ADHD. I wish I did, because then I'd be hyperactive too. Then I'd have a lot of energy, but I'm by default kind of a low energy person, so it kind of keeps everything lower key. But, at the end of the day, it's something that has its advantages, its pluses, its minuses. But like I said, a real quick example, too, of my ADD and how my mind at least just works different. Whether I have ADD or not exactly, I just know my mind certainly works different. I can never afford to go to a psychiatrist and get actually diagnosed, is what you really should do. But, like I said, I don't want me to sound like a hypochondriac or not, but I'm not, but I just know that my mind doesn't work like other people's. It just doesn't. Like I said, I always used to, in like grade school and so forth, envy kids that could like watch a TV show and, or a movie the previous night and come in and just, tell all their friends what happened in the movie. Well, I can never do that. And it's not because I didn't remember the movie or the TV show. Far from it. I mean, I could see just a few seconds of that movie or TV show 10 years in the future, and realize that I saw it. I'd recognize that I saw that movie, just for a few seconds worth. But, so it's all there. I mean, I remember the movie. It's just that I remember, like, I don't know, too much detail or something. I just can't filter through it. And so it's like kind of the subtle chaos that happens in my head, sort of. And it's not like I'm dysfunctional over it. I mean, obviously I'm not dysfunctional. Again, I've developed, again, kind of like, like I said, a form of OCD, if you will, although I kind of use that tongue-in-cheek when I say OCD, but the point is it gives some people an idea of the level of focus I'm talking about, because that's what I've got to do. I've got to have a high level of focus to overcome that tendency I have to want to be distracted and to go off on a tangent in other directions. So I do have to have that obsession. That obsession helps reel that in enough to where I can be productive in life. And I can get things done, because I'm very ultimately, this OCD is really all about achievement. It's about accomplishing something instead of never accomplishing anything. So it's born out of sheer determination, but it is borderline, irrational, quite often. So, at the end of the day, it really is a mild disorder, but I wouldn't say I have an extreme case of OCD or anything. So, and like I said, my ADD is, really pretty extreme, but I keep it under control using those methods. So, but again, it's still what's primarily responsible for me being hyper creative like I am. So, but again, I've learned to manage it and so forth. But again, that's why there's certain things I'm, good at, and certain things I'm, not as good at. So, at the end of the day, and so I have my strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, I mean, I don't want you to think I'm some kind of, guy just, step out of a loony bin or anything here. I mean, the fact of the matter is I'm a fairly rational and logical person, overall, but it takes me some time to get there, because sometimes that's why I'm very analytical, and I do most of that analysis when I'm not having a conversation with somebody, when I can think clearly, because when I'm talking to people, it's hard for me to, again, with the ADD and stuff, it's often hard for me to come to proper conclusions, because I can't think on my feet. That's what I'm saying. I just can't think on my feet as well. Even though you'll find that talking to me, often is not any different than talking to somebody, especially once I get comfortable with you and get to know you. But a lot of it, stems from me not knowing somebody and stuff like that. I am a little bit overwhelmed. But a lot of times, you'll find, that I tend to be silent. And so forth, or not say a lot or whatever. Well, part of it's just due to being overwhelmed. I mean, when that happens, it's almost like my mind is blank, but it's not because it's blank. There's just so much stuff going on in it. I'm so overwhelmed that it's almost like there's a mild static in my head. So, it makes it so that it's hard for me to, to talk a lot. That's one of the reasons why, I can only talk generally about things I happen to be focused on at the time. When I'm actually having a conversation with somebody, it's really, that's why I wanted to make all these tapes, so that you could actually understand it, because when I make tapes, a lot of it is associated with mood. If I'm in the mood to talk about something, I can make a tape on it when I'm in that mood. But if you just ask me about something out of the question, if I'm focused on something else, or we're having a conversation about something else, a lot of times it'll be hard for me to jump onto that subject. Not always, but but particularly when it's talking about my past and everything, because I just have a lot of reservations about talking about my past and certain things. So I'll either not do as good of a job talking about it as I would like on a tape. I mean, on a tape I can be much more thorough, because I'm enthusiastic about talking about it when I'm making a tape, because I'm making the tape when I'm enthusiastic about talking about it. It's not because because I'm making a tape that I'm enthusiastic. It's because I'm making a tape when I'm enthusiastic about the subject. So when I am, I mean, I can be very informative, but when I'm not, I mean, if you just ask me out of the blue, if I'm generally focused on something else and or just not in the mood of talking about something, that's almost impossible for me to, because, like I said, because of how my mind works, it's what I call changing gears. That's why I'm a terrible multitasker, because I can't change gears from subject to subject very quick, or from topic of focus to topic of focus. And when it's something that involves a lot of detail, like my past, where I've got to really take a trip down memory lane, I have to spend a lot of time changing gears from whatever else it is I'm doing to thinking about the past. But again, sometimes I'll just spontaneously, out of the blue, be in the mood to talk about it, and if I have a tape recorder handy, I'll often, record it if I think it's worthwhile recording. So that's why I love tapes. That's why I love these little recorders, these voice recorders. That's why so much of this stuff has been on voice recorder, because it's just, when I'm in the mood to talk about something, I can be very eloquent sometimes, although, again, a little scatterbrained like I'm being right now. But the fact of the matter is, that's when I'm at my peak, but, again, sometimes I can shine when I'm having a conversation with somebody, especially if I kind of know them, and I'm not in a distracting environment, that kind of thing. But oftentimes I can't, and it's just, it's frustrating. It's just very frustrating, because I just know that if I could control that somehow, to where I didn't work like that, oh my God, I wouldn't be in the mess I'm in, because I could maybe be a good salesman, maybe if I could just think on my feet. And bring focus to it, not jump around in conversations as much as like I'm doing on these tapes. But there's just nothing I can really do about it. I mean, like I said, outside of Ritalin, I have to go talk to a psychiatrist or something to get a prescription like that. I can't afford that. So, I mean, again, I only just figured out it was ADD like a couple of years ago, again, after watching that PBS show. Before that, I just didn't know what was wrong. I just knew my mind worked differently. I didn't know why. I didn't have a reason for it. I just knew that it worked differently than other people's all these years. So, like I said, it's either, borderline autism, or maybe it's because I was hit in the head with a lunch pail when I was a kid, and suffered a major concussion. But then again, I think I was kind of like that before that, though. So, I don't know, but, you tell me. But I just know that there are some quirks, but it's also where my creativity comes from, so don't knock it too much. So, but I'm just, also just trying to assure you that, look, I'm not totally off my rocker kind of person. I mean, again, I'm very analytical, particularly once I'll get off the phone with you. I mean, I'll analyze everything we talk about, believe me. The fact of the matter is, though, is that, I just wanted to make it clear that you're not, like, dealing with a nutcase or anything. Remember, I did run a successful business for 6 years, with customers and so forth. So, I mean, I must have something going on there. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's, I'm not a complete nutcase, just there are some quirks, and I just will ask you to understand that. I do have a few quirks, so I've got certainly a little eccentricity too, but again, not to the extent of being a crackpot by any means. That's why I say I'm not a crackpot inventor. So, honestly, I don't even think most, products like, Swiss Army knives, are a very good idea. I think the Swiss Army knife is actually almost terrible at everything it does. But it's nice to be prepared to understand the practical value, to understand why they sell, except for certainly some versions of Swiss Army knives are definitely crackpotish if you've seen some of the outlandish versions they have. But, I'm somebody that doesn't think a product like that's not a good idea, and I don't believe in Bigfoot or UFOs or, any of that nonsense. I just think it's a bunch of BS. But, ghosts, I don't believe in that sort of thing either. If you do, okay, well, that's your opinion. Maybe you have your reason. Maybe you can convince me, but I used to believe in things like that a long time ago. But again, I've done so much analysis on it that I'm, pretty convinced in my opinion on it, on subjects like that. So, at the end of the day, I'm just trying to show you that I am a very, very rational person. So I'm not, like I said, some kind of nut job. So, even though I do have my problems, but it's managed chaos, is what it is. So that's the whole reason I'm kind of telling you this, because and making this video, because I know you're gonna have some dealings with me that you're going to be scratching your head on. Otherwise, well, I just wanted to show you that my mind does not work the same as other people's. So, anyway. Yeah, I have a couple more points to add to it. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, this guy just goes on and on and on. And didn't realize that other people have lives. Other people don't care. They've got their own things to worry about. They got a million things, and I understand that. I appreciate that. But you got to understand, this is about the best I can do. I mean, I'm really beating myself up trying to edit all this stuff down. But like I said, I'm very much a devil's in the details kind of guy, and when it's important for somebody to actually, get to know me, well, I don't want to leave any details out, because, like I said, that it constitutes miscommunication, because people can often draw the wrong conclusions if they don't know all the details. But you can make the argument, too, that, people can draw the wrong conclusions, if they have too many details, because they're too overwhelmed to absorb it all. So, I mean, it's kind of a catch-22, but, again, it's part of my OCD, that that I make these this long. I'm just so obsessed with wanting to communicate with people, not leaving any details out as much as possible, that it's hard for me to do otherwise. And because I just do fundamentally believe that miscommunications is the mother of all f-ups, if you know what I mean. I mean, I just, I'm really kind of obsessed with making sure that things are communicated thoroughly to people. But on the other hand, I know I'm shooting myself in the foot, but I just don't really have a recourse on it. There's really no in between. So again, I'm doing the best, and believe me, I could make, if you think these videos are long, oh my God, you have no idea how long I could make these if I just really had no constraints on it. So, I mean, they'd be 10 times longer than this. So I really am making a lot of progress keeping these as short as I am, believe me. But see, there I am, I'm going off on a tangent again. And I thought this was going to last 10 seconds to make this comment. But I will say, as far as like lengthy information and stuff, this is why I say I know it'll get better, because I'm only obsessed with telling people stuff if they don't know me. Once you get to know me, and because the one other obsession I've got is that I really hate repeating myself. I really hate repeating myself, because I look at it as a waste of time, and I'm obsessed with not wasting my time. Even though I waste plenty of it, I'm still obsessed with trying not to. And so I don't like repeating myself. So once I've told you something, I feel like I've got closure on it, so I'm not as inclined to be obsessive about, going into detail on something I've already covered in the future. So at the end of the day, as long as I can assume you've watched all these tapes, I'll feel content with the fact I've disseminated that information to you. You won't have to do it again. So if you have watched all these tapes, good. If you haven't, well, I'll remind you to watch certain tapes in the future if I see there's a hole in your knowledge you shouldn't have. But at the end of the day, that's the one good thing, is that the more I get to know you, the less lengthy I'm going to go on about things. It's not going to drive you crazy like 3 years from now, I'll put it to you that way. It does get better, because the more I get to know you, the more I understand that you know me, and at the end of the day, once that happens, I don't feel as compelled to be obsessive anymore about, communicating too many details. You know what I'm saying? I get to have a feel for what your level of knowledge is and understanding on certain things is, including me and my history. So I feel less compelled. The OCD doesn't, starts dying off when it comes to that situation once you get to know me. So, it won't always be like this, is what I'm trying to say. It's not always going to be a tremendous waste of your time, because believe me, I understand the value of time. Oh, believe me, and I just feel so bad that all this stuff is so long, because I understand the value of time. So much more than a lot of people do. I really understand, because again, I am obsessed with with not wanting to waste time. It's one of the other reasons I'm an inventor, because I'm so obsessed with efficiency. I like things to be efficient, to waste as little of your time as possible. It's one of the big things that has drawn me into inventing. Which honestly, this should go into really my history tapes or something like that, my autobiography tapes. But the fact of the matter is, it really is that obsession, that it's been one of the big driving forces behind me being so obsessed with being an inventor, because of just not wanting things to be a pain in the ass. If something's a pain in the ass, means it's wasting my time. So I don't like things to waste my time, and that's an obsession. I mean, it's a pet peeve, to say the least. So I do like efficiency. And to me, I look at disseminating all this information to you as efficient, because it gets it all out of the way. I mean, in a nutshell, in just like 20 some odd hours, you can get to know me a level that otherwise would take you 20 years to get to know me. And just by listening to these videos, I mean, it really does kind of condense it very, very nicely. And like I said, this stuff is all really condensed compared to what I could make it. If I just didn't have, had no control at all, if I just had no, wasn't trying to control it at all, I mean, it would, it could be a lot longer than all this. And believe me, it is. I mean, I've got all this kind of stuff on my audio files, in detail that would just make your head spin. So, anyway, but again, that's kind of part of my problem, where a lot of this comes from, is that almost in some ways, I'm not going to say I have an eidetic memory, but in many ways I have a very, very good memory, and the problem is I remember too much. I mean, it's like sorting through chaos, trying to recall things out of my mind. Again, that's why if we're just having like a conversation on something, it's like chaos for me to try to switch gears and onto some other topic, because it's difficult. Like, for example, one question I was daydreaming about last night, you might ask me, is, oh, Robert, when did you first decide to start up Terra Technica, or when did you first decide to start up, CSSL, or whatever? Well, that's a loaded question to me, because to me there is no starting point. It's a series of decisions that have to add up to a greater whole. I don't just make rash decisions. I almost never do, especially if they're on something that's a big thing, like going into business or anything. There is no one point that I can identify as the starting point, per se. It's a whole bunch of decisions, a whole bunch of series of analyses that all acidulated to, when you look at the balance of things, the pluses and minuses column, to being a go. So I mean, it happens over a period of years. Even major purchases I typically would make over extended periods, a year or more often. I mean, I'm not really that impulsive about a lot of stuff. So that's just something else you should know, that I'm actually rather controlled and reserved about what I do a lot of times. So and so much so I'll lose my place a lot, like I just did there for a minute. Forgot what the hell I was saying. I should also note too that I don't have an obsession, like I said earlier, with cleanliness or anything like that, and I don't have an obsession with perfection either. What I am obsessed with is achievement. Overall, and making things just good enough to do what the outcome is, what the desired outcome is. So if I make a little gizmo for myself or something, I don't really care how it looks. I just care that it works. Okay, now if I'm making a gizmo for the market, well, the achievement, in order to earn that achievement point, is making it good enough to sell. Okay, but it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not like Steve Jobs, who is just ultra obsessed with perfection. I'm obsessed with perfection in the sense that it needs to achieve my end goal, whatever that end goal is. If my end goal is to make sure that product is never a pain in somebody's butt, then I'm obsessed with that. If my obsession is to, for achievement, that is to make a product that lasts forever, like our LED technology, then I become obsessed with it and achieve that. To get the maximum longevity out of it I can. I become obsessed with that goal. Again, not so concerned about appearance. Well, with consumer products, well, the appearance, functionality, the weight, all these ergonomic factors start to come into play to make it a good selling product, so I become obsessed with those factors. So again, I'm not obsessed with perfection except as it applies to achievement. So, that's kind of a little trick with me. And again, some products, doesn't matter as much how they look as how well they function. And a lot of times, and the priority to me is always going to be to the function of the product. The appearance never trumps the function of the product, because that's how you put crappy products out of the market ultimately that really look like they should help people, when in fact all they do is make people's lives miserable because they weren't very well thought out, and which defeats the whole point for people buying products. That's why for so many years I was so obsessed with putting my own products out on the market and exploiting my own inventions. It's because of the fact that I knew that other people wouldn't do that right, and that's certainly probably going to be the case here with you. Again, there are going to be other things you're obsessed with that are going to trump things that I'd normally obsessed with, but that's why I say, hell, if you own the IP, then I don't really care. I just care if I make money at this point in my life. I'm not as big of an idealist as I used to be in that regard, but at the end of the day, I still say that still is kind of how I work when it comes to my OCD, with regards to doing things. That's what I'm really truly obsessed about more than anything, is achievement, even though I do have my other little the other little drawbacks sometimes that OCD gets in the way, like I've talked about on the tape, to some extent. But I appreciate your time, listening to this video. I'm sorry I was so obsessed with it that it took so darn long. I wish I could have done it as short as the ADD video, but anyway, it's still an important topic too, because this is really, it does factor in to a lot of things I do, so that's why it was worth covering.